Good afternoon, my friends. This is Paul, and welcome back to another episode of ISTJ Info Dumping. Yes, we're bringing back the old name, mainly because now that I've officially been typed as an ISTJ by two sources who have taken certification lessons, I figured it was a good time to bring the name back. And also, I think I've gotten better at the language choices I've used in determining where I'm getting the information I'm presenting from, which are usually from three broad categories: personal experience, which is usually the biggest determining factor, research, and just guesswork based on what I know and what I've observed about commonalities between people of similar types and function stacks. Today's video is brought to you by, no, this isn't a sponsored video. One of my viewers, Money Management, asked me to describe the difference between how an ISTJ and an INTJ use introverted feeling. They are the only two types that have introverted feeling in the tertiary position. So for those of you that don't know what introverted feeling is, people that use this function have a preference for personal inner values and core inner emotions to be expressed over the collective emotions of the people. They typically are very individualistic people, preferring to focus on what feels right to them personally. What are their personal values? I've often heard it described as a moral compass that helps them know what's right or wrong based on how they feel about it. For ISTJs and INTJs, a lot of stereotypes say that we are very unfeeling, kind of aloof people, when that's honestly about as far from the truth as you can get. From literally almost every ISTJ and INTJ I've ever talked to, we actually have quite a lot of emotional depth. The problem is that we don't always choose to express it. So when introverted feeling is in the tertiary spot, it leads to them having reservations about how much of their emotions and values do they want to share with the world. Now, to give a little bit of contrast, the FP types are the ones that have a tendency to kind of like shower you with their own feelings. They might not necessarily say, I am feeling sad right now, in a very direct manner, especially if they're the NFP types. But they will find some way to make sure that whatever it is that they're feeling is going to be shown and not hidden. So, for example, an ISFP who feels very strongly about an agenda might have like a flag or a t-shirt. I'm one to talk, but I've gotten better at it. But they will not only wear it on a t-shirt, but it'll show on their face, and it'll show in their speech. They might start crying out of nowhere, and the high up introverted feelers might even go so far as to look down on people who either don't like emotions or say that you should stifle them, saying, why doesn't everyone just accept feelings? God gave us feelings. Why not use them? ISTJs and INTJs, in contrast, are much more about reserving when and how much emotion they're going to reveal at any given time. I've often described it for myself as like a dog, or I guess any other animal, on a leash. How much or how little you want to let it go. Most of the time, I think I've gotten to the point in my life where I am decently good at knowing when to reveal my emotions. And I think most of my friends would say that I'm relatively open to the idea of that I can trust them with what it is that I'm feeling, even if what I'm feeling isn't necessarily reflecting objective logic. I might feel like someone hates me, but that doesn't actually mean someone does hate me. But you don't want to say that to just anyone because they could take it the wrong way. So we make observations, we hold back, and we say, this doesn't seem like the type of person I should be expressing things to. However, as far as the differences between how the two types express emotions, again, it looks very similar from the outside, but I think if I'm understanding the request correctly, I believe what money management is getting at is what triggers particularly strong emotional reactions. What causes each of the types to feel strong surges that make them feel that whole body experience of, oh my gosh, I am feeling something and it is consuming me. Whereas the extroverted feelers would say more like, oh my gosh, I'm getting a bad emotional read of the room. That would be what they describe it as. Whereas the introverted feelers are more like, oh my gosh, this is taking over my body. I am feeling very intense right now. At least that's how I've heard an ENFP describe it. I would say that the dominant functions of the ISTJ and INTJ are typically what causes them to feel things in the first place. For ISTJs like myself, introverted sensing is all about familiar experiences, but not just having a memory. Any type can have a good memory, but ISTJs and also ISFJs are known as V types for memory because they're constantly filing through stuff that they've learned in the past and being able to pull it out in the split second. They spot something familiar, they're immediately going to go back to where it happened before, and this could be decades ago, and they will have a nearly photographic memory of whatever it is that's similar. So yes, any type can remember stuff. I know INFJs and ENFPs that'll say, oh, I remember that happening, but they often won't use it to make decisions, and it often won't be a source of emotional discomfort. For an ISTJ, since they lean so heavily on their introverted sensing for pretty much literally everything, it leads to particular memories giving a much stronger surge of emotion than what you would expect from any other type, really. An ISTJ might, for instance, heck, I'll just give you a story of when this really happened. I decided I wasn't going to go on the mission trip in 2017, but I still wanted to be of some help to the group, so I showed up to pack the vans, but I didn't actually ride in the vans. And I kid you not, within like 2 seconds, as I was like in the trunk, grabbing the luggage and putting it in, I smelled the van. And immediately, I was like, oh my gosh, I felt this before. Oh, this is what it felt like to be on a mission trip. This is what it felt like to be excited and scared and amazed and terrified all at the same time of being able to serve the Lord. Oh my gosh, I want to do it again. Of course I didn't, because I hadn't packed. That would have been stupid if I had just snuck into the camp like that, because Catholic Heart wouldn't have had enough spaces. But the fact remains that I received such a strong surge of emotion from that memory, from that sensual, not sexual, sensual recollection of whatever it was that was familiar. And I think I might have been way more emotional in that moment than maybe even an FP type, but that's not how I expressed it to the people there. To the people in the parking lot, I was just, same old, same old. But then after they got back from the trip, that's when I called one of the chaperones that did go on the mission trip and I said, this is how I felt. Oh, I got a phone right here. I might as well act it out. This is how I felt. I want to go back on the mission trip. Let's talk about this. And so because I felt comfortable with him, that was when I felt the willingness to express the intensity of what happened in the moment. I think an FP type would more likely kind of break down in the moment, but they wouldn't do it over the smell. They would probably do it over something more along the lines of an immediate happening. Like for, say, an SFP, if in the moment a sensory experience bothers them, they might be expressive of it. For the NFPs, they might be more likely to be triggered by a cool possibility or a negative possibility being shot down. For the ISTJs, their emotions tend to come from past experiences reliving themselves. And so when they get into certain stressful situations, they can get into what's called a dominant tertiary loop, where their introverted sensing is constantly reliving the past and their introverted feeling is constantly making them feel bad about it. So they're literally walking time machines of constantly wondering, oh my gosh, why can't I go back to that moment? Why can't I relive that experience exactly as it was? Why do things have to change? My headphones are slipping. As far as the INTJs, they don't use introverted sensing. In fact, their introverted sensing is their eighth function. So for them, it is very hard to recall specific details. And because their extroverted sensing is the fourth, they're typically not very well aware of their external environment. And when they are, they tend to prioritize what's in the moment more than what already happened. In fact, they often get exhausted thinking about what already happened, and often are the ones telling the ISTJs to shut up already. We've heard the story 100 times. Their introverted feeling tends to trigger when they have particularly strong emotions of where they see their life going. INTJs and also INFJs are also all about possibilities. They love to look at the deeper meaning behind everything, and they tend to be the most futuristic and goal-driven of all the types. So INTJs and INFJs often have a startlingly accurate forecast of the future that oftentimes they don't even know how to describe to people when they ask them, how did you figure that out? What makes you so confident that'll happen? And when it actually does happen, usually the most they can say is, it was just intuition, guys. Seriously? The INTJs will, of course, have more of an attitude. The INFJs will probably stumble over their words a little bit and be like, I just knew. And then like kind of laugh their way out of it because their extroverted feeling doesn't want them to make a scene. So INTJs are going to be looking at what ifs and what could be. So if they feel very strongly about a future possibility, that's going to give them their drive and their emotional impact. That's probably not the word I'm looking for, but I think a lot of INTJs, they like to talk about what their goals are. They like to talk about where they see their life. My INTJ best friend will not shut up about his view of what he wants in a girlfriend, what he wants in a future house, what he wants in a wife. Sometimes he gets so carried away that he starts talking about his wedding, and I'm like, dude, you don't even have a girlfriend. Slow down. You don't know for certain if you're even going to date someone. Just because you want to doesn't mean you are going to. But it like literally consumes him all the way through. Like, if there is a possibility of dating a particular girl and that girl turns him down, he is going to feel terrible. And if he's in the right crowd, he is going to blab about it nonstop. And because he has introverted feeling and not extroverted feeling, he's not going to notice that no one gives a darn about what he's feeling. Of course, the extroverted feelers might like put up with it and be polite, but the introverted feelers are like, oh, when will you shut up? Please just stop talking right now. So I think ISTJs can get overwhelmed by possibilities, but for them, since they use extroverted intuition and because it's in the fourth, they're more likely to get into panic mode over unforeseen possibilities, stuff that they could not predict, things that could happen, but they don't have any evidence to support that claim. So an ISTJ might, for example, be worried about the roof collapsing in July when there's no snow. But because there's a possibility that there could be a thunderstorm tomorrow and it could strike down that tree and that tree could fall on the roof, that could cause them to be a bit paranoid. Granted, most ISTJs aren't that bad. I don't think I'd be able to live another day if I constantly lived in that fear. But when I get into familiar situations, especially when it comes to stuff like rejection, I might get into, oh, great, this is familiar territory again. And then my extroverted intuition fills in the blanks with, could this possibility play out the same way as it did in the past? ISTJs are more likely to get emotionally triggered and feel strong reactions from past occurrences repeating themselves, whereas INTJs are likely to get emotionally triggered and intensified by possibilities that could happen. Now, are there healthy and unhealthy ways for the types to express their emotions? Personally, I think people don't give our two types enough credit for how much we do express. I just don't think people approve of the method that we do. A lot of times when ISTJs and INTJs feel comfortable telling someone something, they don't really know how to modulate their voices so it can come across as though they're talking kind of monotone and that they're not feeling anything. They might be just talking about the worst day they ever had, but it could be as boring as a weather report to the onlooking types. And they're like, how are you going through so much hardship, yet you're hardly emoting at all? I know my INTJ best friend often says that his body language never changes depending on how he feels. So his sad face is the same as his angry face, which is the same as his happy face. And a lot of people can't tell what he's actually feeling because he doesn't know how to make his face emote to what he wants to. But I also think that he has often expressed to me that he is basically the open book type. Now, you would think INTJs, open book, what the heck? But I do think that INTJs are much more focused on the future and efficiency than they are in their emotions. Just as they get older, they learn to realize that maybe it's okay to overshare. They just don't know when to stop because, again, they don't use their extroverted feeling to read the room. ISTJs are a little bit better because they might come to a point in their life where they're like, yeah, okay, I can go ahead and share things. But then one incident happened in their past where maybe they overshared, maybe they hurt someone's feelings, and that person stopped being loyal to the ISTJ. Unlike the INTJs, who typically have trouble describing what they had for breakfast, ISTJs will remember that moment vividly, and they will say, I will not let that happen again. I will make sure that the next time this situation repeats itself, I am not going to overshare this time. Maybe this time I'll share more so that we don't have this great calamity repeat itself. So that's why I think ISTJs are slightly more socially graceful than an INTJ because they learn from their mistakes. And so that's why you might get an ISTJ that's a bit more expressive because they've learned, oh, that person didn't like my lack of expressiveness back then, so let's change it so that we don't have to repeat the outcome. Like I said, ISTJs are walking time machines. If they want something to repeat itself, they will. And if they don't want something to repeat itself, they'll make sure it doesn't happen. And most of the time they succeed. They just get into panic mode with their extroverted intuition. So that's why we love it when the other types can tell us, no, you're just having an episode. Don't worry about it. So as a result, I think like for me personally, I know how to overcompensate for my lack of extroverted feeling by asking people questions about how they're feeling in a moment when I'm talking. So if I happen to be like oversharing something, I'll usually say, oh, is this bothering you? Not because I'm actually empathetic or that I'm actually sympathetic, but because I don't know any better. I'm not good at reading people. I can sort of tell when people are feeling something, but I've since learned that there are a lot of core exceptions to that. Like my friend Allison, for example, her well, obviously eyes themselves don't change shape, but like the sockets of her eyes are shaped in such a way that it makes it look like she's constantly crying, even though she's not. She's actually a very happy and bubbly person. But whenever I see her, I'm like, are you okay? What's bothering you? She's like, nothing's bothering me. That's just how I look. So I've learned that some people just happen to look as though they're emotional when they're not. I might see a person with furrowed brows and say, what's bothering you? And the person's like, oh, the sun's just in my eyes. So that's where I get confused. I don't usually know how to tell the nuances between a natural occurrence that's similar to body language versus what actually is emotional. And usually, people hide from me what they're feeling, and that makes me furious. Thankfully, that's something that I'm typically pretty good at expressing to my friends. Like, hey, stop hiding what you're feeling from me. Don't try to spare my feelings. Let me know if you think I'm a jerk. Granted, I don't really like it when people yell or raise their voice about it, but I don't like them to be silent either. I like them to be expressive. And I think INTJs are like that too. I think introverted feelers in general like the idea of do to others what you would have them do to you. So if they are expected to be blunt and honest and always saying exactly what's on their mind without thinking about how it's going to be perceived. That's how they want others to feel. The idea of extroverted feelers softening their words so that they might dance around the issue or not tell it like it is makes them angry because they don't like to do that, so they don't want others doing it to them. See, even atheists can follow the golden rule. I think the main difference between the two types is ISTJs and INTJs are both reserved. They both wait until the right time to reveal their emotions. Once they do find the right time, they can have a tendency to overshare. But ISTJs learn from when it was that they maybe overshared or undershared or didn't share at all, and they can improve. INTJs, there's a term used among every other type called those clunky NTs because they seem to like fumble their way through social situations. And so I honestly wish I had advice to help them, but I don't because they probably won't accept the advice. Besides, this video isn't about giving them advice in social situations. Thank you very much for putting up with me talking about the messy world of our inner emotions, which are often so much more ridiculous than what we actually tell you. If you feel like you know everything there is to know about us, you probably don't. You just think you know a lot about us because we've come to the realization that you're a person that we can trust. But I don't think until probably a marriage will an ISTJ or an INTJ ever feel comfortable sharing everything. And even then, they might pick and choose when to share it. So I would say that if you want to know if you've truly known everything there is to know about how an ISTJ or INTJ feels, just wait for them to say it. Or just ask, have you shared everything about yourself? And they'll say yes or no. Very simple. You don't need to overthink it whatsoever. Just ask and you will receive. Atheists do take Bible verses into account. You see what I mean there? So with that, thank you very much for watching. Let me know down in the comments what type you are, and if you relate or don't relate, or if you're totally off, maybe you're an extroverted feeler and you're like, I can't imagine thinking so much about myself and not thinking about others. And also just if you want me to do a Myers-Briggs video on a different type of functions. Let me know either way. I love reading the comments. I love responding to them. Some of you don't notice that I respond to them, but I do. It might be on YouTube's end because, like I said, I do respond to like every comment. The last comment I didn't respond to was almost a year ago. So let me know what your thoughts are. Special thanks to my patrons Matthew Rakowski, Sploon Ghost Splatcat, and Scooter Doodles for supporting me on Patreon. And until the next time, remember to keep the faith, stay epic, and God bless. Bye!